Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we get into Red Raiders on the rise. A couple of names that we feel like may have been under-discussed as we look ahead to 2024. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. And you can use our promo code Locked On CFB. That's Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program and begin your coaching legacy today. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Great to be back with you today, Chris, as we are creeping closer to an honest-to-goodness game week and a kickoff on August 31st. And as we get into it today, we'll take a listen to some thoughts from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire, as we'll have your daily or twice, 3 times weekly offensive line shuffle update. We're going to get back into that. Yes, figuratively, literally, maybe the biggest story as we proceed through fall camp, but also wanted to go the other direction today, Chris, because things like the offensive line or names like Josh Kelly, Taj Brooks, these are things that we have discussed almost ad nauseum for good reason, because they're obviously going to factor in heavily to the Red Raiders' success this season. But I want to go to the other end of the spectrum and maybe get to some of these names that we feel like we might have neglected a little bit. They're not necessarily, I don't think, under the radar, because in one case specifically has already contributed to Texas Tech, but maybe just some that we haven't really seen get quite as much attention as some others. So we'll touch on an offensive player and we will touch on a defensive player. And let's just begin on the offensive side of the football, Chris, with one guy that is familiar to the Red Raiders, but as a pass catcher, kind of feel like maybe he is under-discussed, at least leading into the season. Let's take a listen to Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire talking about the one, the only, Dre McCrae.
Dre McCrae, without a doubt, on offense. Man, the dude just is a machine, loves football, catches the ball in traffic. Good things happen whenever it's in his hand.
Dre is a guy, Chris, that heavily discussed in the return game, and obviously for good reason there, but maybe someone that we haven't quite paid enough attention to as a pass catcher and how he could impact the offense.
Dre is somebody that we talked about a ton at this point last year. In fact, he was probably on a very short list of when the season begins. I'm most excited to see, and his name would have been when listed there amongst the 3 to 5 of new guys. Well, all of a sudden you go from now we got all these new fancy shiny toys. We've talked about those guys a lot. We've done a lot of talking about Coy Aiken. Okay, I think that is fair to point out. But Josh Kelly has gotten a lot of chatter. Caleb Douglas to a certain extent. I think we talk a lot about the tight ends in that group. And Dre is kind of in some ways under the radar, which is weird because we talked about him so much a year ago. And he came into last season having, I think, caught 17 touchdown passes in the 2 years previous. It is prior stop. And last year, it's just under 30 receptions, a couple of touchdowns, but where he made his money and where I think he really showed up was in the return game, which we weren't necessarily anticipating. But typically, who's a great example? I mean, because I kind of use a guy like Dre, even though he wasn't a junior college transfer. In some ways it is. When somebody comes and transfers into your program, they've got 2 years left. Almost all the time. And the best example of this is a guy like Dwayne Slay. It takes everybody a bit to acclimate and to adjust in year one. And then the second year, boy, you get the best version of who they are. I mean, Dwayne Slay was a bit player, his junior year, and then his senior year, he was the defensive player of the year in the league. And he was, Allen Everidge is still, parts of him are still wandering around at Jones AT&T Stadium, the former Kansas State quarterback.
He became a Texas Tech legend.
Absolutely, with the 8 or 9 forced fumbles that he had that year, just was a beast. I'm in no way suggesting that that's what kind of season you're going to look at from Dre McCrae. However, point being, you're going to get the best version of him, I think, in year 2, which is why I was bringing it up. And he's been somebody that we've just kind of not touched on a lot. And he's also going to benefit a great deal from these new fancy, shiny toys around him. Because I think last year he really had no help around him. There wasn't any. It's kind of like a lineup in baseball when you got a stud 3-hole hitter and the 2-hole guy is just not very good. So there's no protection in the lineup for your best hitter, and they're not going to see anything to hit and that whole deal. Dre, in many ways, will benefit from the Joshes, the Calebs, the Micah Hudsons, and all those things. And I'll be shocked if you don't get a much better version of him. But he's somebody that, because we've talked about so many of these other guys, he's kind of been under the radar. And he's, knowing his personality, he's probably okay with that. He's probably not yearning for a bunch of attention and all those things. And I do think you're going to get plenty of him in the kick return game. But I think at receiver is where it's been interesting. It also tells me, if you kind of read between the lines, or I don't know, if you start to let your mind wander and go, okay, what am I really hearing here? You may also be hearing that, because you haven't heard Micah Hudson's name in a week or so, as far as he's just lighting it up, folks. But it's the Dre McCrae. This is the kind of conversation that just speaks to how hard the game is, and that you just don't come in no matter how good you are and just hit the ground running. That's extremely rare. But it's the Dre McCrae that may be much more of a playmaker initially, until Micah gets his sea legs under him and kind of figures this whole Division I thing out. And then we see a better version of Micah in November than we did, when we're on the cusp of starting the season. But from Tech's standpoint, you've got, a Dre McCrae, and I think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, I think, for a true freshman, and obviously this is not even a conversation, I don't think, with most true freshman defensive linemen, offensive linemen, but for a true freshman in general, just to be good enough to not be redshirted is a pretty quick acclimation, much less like, hey, are you going to be an all-conference player? I mean, that would be like a universe away that we're not even really considering, although we'll allow it if Micah Hudson wants to go ahead and do something like that. But I think you hit the nail on the head with the lineup description and how it could impact Dre McCrae, because at this time a year ago, you're exactly right. We were talking about him a lot, and we were talking about him so much because he was sort of the solution to your non-explosive problems. I remember we talked about him thinking, all right, well, maybe this is the guy that's going to come in and sort of be the firecracker and the one that can do some dynamic things for you and can kind of get down the field or turn chicken spit into chicken soup, whatever it might be. And he may still have that capability, but when he was the focal point, like, all right, well, you're the guy that's supposed to be TNT dynamite. Now go ahead and do it. It's not that easy. You don't just flip the switch and do that, right? You do that because you've got some opportunities that I think are complemented because of some of the other weapons around you. So now whenever you talk about a tandem or a duo or a quadruo or whatever, I don't know what the word is, when we're talking about 4 or 5 wide receivers that you really feel like the defense will have to account for, then obviously you would think all those guys are going to benefit. We talked about Koy Aiken in a similar way, but particularly Dre McCrae. So really excited to see what type of opportunity he's going to have in his second season as a Red Raider. And while we're on that subject, obviously he is one of the best kickoff return men in the nation, but there's been a lot of question about whether or not we would see him in the punt return game. And I think there is a desire to, it sounds like, see him factor in there. But Coach McGuire actually said this week, if somebody's receiving a punt tomorrow, it's Josh Kelly. That sounds like he would get the first crack at that opportunity.
Yeah, Josh Kelly, I think Jordan Brown, I think Micah Hudson, and then Dre McCrae factors in there somewhere after that. But it comes down to, people may not realize it, it's far different to field a kickoff compared to a punt. Just the catching it, okay, aspect of it, and the way that it looks once you do catch it and all those things. Are just two, in some ways, very different skill sets.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're trying to put, and I think as Joey put it, I mean, I think when he's talking about the punt returner, he's like, this is just one more touch for a Josh Kelly, like one more way to get the ball in his hands, or a Micah Hudson or a Jordan Brown. So it's also part of the equation too. This is one more way we can get one more playmakers involved, and all those things. By the way, you're what did you say? Like a quadro?
I don't think that's right.
Quintet. Okay, there you go. Because I always have a hard time with the word triumvirate, I think is how you say it.
But you've nailed it a few times on this show.
Okay. And spelling it, I mean, can I get the origin, please? I mean, I would fail the spelling bee.
I think it goes something like TRIUM Vrit. I think is how you spell it. But yeah, I don't know what that group's going to look like. Of course, when you're rolling through a camp and nothing happened yet, you're like, wow, what an embarrassment of riches. We've got like 7 options, and that'll be whittled down, I'm sure, whenever the lights come on and things start to happen. And as you and I have talked about a little bit this offseason, you know, there have been some seasons gone by where you're like, wow, the quarterback threw it to 7 guys today, and nobody had over 40 yards. So we wouldn't mind the alternative to that, where there is a bit more of a focus like, hey, here's the dude, and here's the B dude and the C dude, and these are really the collection of guys. That's the triumvirate that the defense is really going to have to account for. But you know, Dre McCrae is going to factor into that, and can't wait to see what he does that maybe we don't even anticipate, because I'm not sure that last year at this time, as we were talking about him so much, I don't know if I ever uttered the word kick returner. I don't know if I ever even conceived of the thought that, hey, he's also going to be one of the best kick returners in the country. So I'm sure some on the inside maybe had that type of insight, but was not something I had on my bingo card necessarily.
Yeah, very much like found money.
Yes.
You know, when you put in the jacket, you're like, there's a $20 bill in here. I had no idea. That's kind of what I would envision there. I mean, I think he had like 5 returns over 50 yards, maybe like 7 returns over 30 yards. He had the 100-yard return for touchdown. I mean, yeah, there was some juice there, and those are hidden yardage, kind of like hidden, found money or whatever. But yeah, I was not anticipating that at all either, and had no idea. But that's where he made his mark.
Let's flip to the other side of the line of scrimmage, and I want to get to a name defensively that we feel like maybe in the category of under-discussed. First, today's episode brought to you by Ibata, a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're buying. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibata, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you can get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Best Buy, and plenty more. And right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. So just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Let's flip to the other side of the line of scrimmage, and I want to get to a name defensively that we feel like maybe in the category of under-discussed. And this dude just may be totally off the radar for most Red Raider fans, because he is a transfer, and he's someone that was not allowed to play until the 12th hour last year, like I think literally 15 minutes before the bowl game. Hey, bud, you want to put on a uniform? Get out there on the field? We're talking about the former Baylor Bear, now Red Raider, A.J. McCarty. And McCarty is someone that factors in, as we discussed a week ago, Chris, at a premier position defensively at the star spot. He's been competing there with B.J. Jordan. That spot is one that can do a lot of things for the defense if it is manned well. You've got one of the better competitions sort of playing out there. There's no doubt about that. But I want to focus in on McCarty specifically as maybe someone who needs to have a little more discussion around him heading into the season. And someone that was singing his praises just this week was, again, his head coach, Joey McGuire.
AJ is playing at another level. The speed that he's playing at right now is really impressive, and BJ's not backing off the competition. But I love the way AJ's playing. Like he he is constantly an example. Whenever we have team meetings at night, we do everybody wears a GPS unit. We have a competition, max velocity competition, and AJ has been the fastest at 21.7 miles per hour, and he just keeps showing up on tape. So I would say Star's been the biggest improvement.
Obviously, Chris, that's great to hear. And going back to when he arrived as a transfer to Texas Tech prior to last season, we were kind of playing will he, won't he game as to whether or not he would be cleared to play last year. He was not again until eventually at the end of the season prior to the bowl game. If he would have been cleared, I think he would have been definitely on the radar of Tech fans, because it sounded like from the beginning that he's got a chance to be a playmaker. So I'm glad to hear him factoring in so heavily during this camp.
When you got him, I think we had said multiple times, he's good enough to start for you now. And this was even last year when you had a lot of old heads on that side of the ball. And I wasn't sure specifically where it would be, but he's a Big 12 starter type guy. This is somebody that's played 30 games in college, so it automatically he becomes one of your more experienced guys, and he is somebody that I think is very physical. He's got some experience under his belt. I think it's kind of fascinating that this is where they've funneled him to the star position. Wasn't sure if it was going to be safety or even corner, because I think he could do a little bit of everything. 6 foot, about just under 200 pounds, but it's just that age and experience. And when you hear a coach, you can read between the lines again here with what Joey is talking about. And when he starts to say things like he just continues to show up on tape, this tells me this is your starter at Star. Unless there's some sort of hiccup in the next week where somebody tweaks something, this or that, and they have to miss some days, continues to show up on tape, and he's one of your fastest guys and all those things. That is pretty much, when you're talking about the other guy going, he hadn't, the whoever's competing with him, Jordan Sanford, I think it was, or Brennan Jordan, one of the two.
Yeah, BJ Jordan.
Yeah, Brennan Jordan. He's not backing off at all, but you can start to project or predict, if you want to, that's where this is headed. That AJ McCarty would be your starting star. We'll see if that's right, but that's what I hear when I hear Joey talking about it. And that doesn't shock me, because I think we sat here and said multiple times last August, this is somebody that's good enough for you to start right now. It just so happens that he's going to do that a year later, in my opinion.
Yeah, man, looking forward to seeing him on the field. Obviously, if he is a starter, does not mean clearly that Jordan would not be on the field as well. And who knows, depending upon the package, could see both at the same time or something along those lines. Before we move on from some of this individual personnel, I want to get to another thought from Coach McGuire that was basically talking about the next wave, some of those young guys that are really standing out to this point in fall camp. And maybe you should get used to these names now so they won't be under discussed this time next year when we're getting ready for 2025. And one of these names also factors into the conversation that we were just having as it relates to that star position. When we talked about it last week, and we're talking about McCarty, we're talking about Jordan, I think you said something along the lines of really being curious also to hear who the next guy in line would be at that position. And one of those guys that you'll hear about here in just a moment is going to be that guy. I'll defer to Red Raider head coach again, Joey McGuire.
2 young guys, like redshirt freshmen, you ask like what young guys have jumped out. Like Justin Horn and Marcus Ramon Edwards are, it's going to sound funny. Not like funny, haha, but like, no, you should. But they're starting to look like football players. Like, they're doing football things. They were so young last year. And Marcus Ramon Edwards, he played running back, and he was just the best athlete on the team, so he just probably went and covered everybody. He's starting to make football plays. Justin Horn is starting to make football plays. It's really exciting to see those guys.
Marcus Ramon Edwards, an LBK guy, and the guy that would be next in line at the star spot. We've talked a little bit about Justin Horn, the sensei, martial arts background for Mr. Horn. But, man, really excited about these guys that just, I think coming into their time at Texas Tech, I would just hear about some really dynamic athleticism as far as those two are concerned. And I think that's kind of what you hear Coach McGuire describing there in his almost Joe Pesci kind of way. Funny, ha-ha, funny how, like I make you laugh. No, funny like no, they're looking like football players as they grow up and mature within the program, and I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him factor in here or there in 2024.
Do you think you and I ever did things that look like football things, or hey, they're starting to actually look like a football player? I don't know if I ever checked that box, and they're doing football things. No, they just, again, did not check that box. I'll just speak for myself. I don't want to include my man Cowan into that conversation. Marcus Ramon Edwards, MRE, is a freak. This is somebody that like passes the eye test. He is the very definition of a hybrid. And what I mean by that is I think you look at him and go, star, outside linebacker, defensive end. Like he's just got this unique size and skill and rawness about him that it's just a one unbelievable piece of clay that you're trying to mold. And to Joey's point, there wasn't a lot of coaching in high school for him because he played at a private school here in town, and he just was allowed to kind of be this freak athlete, and he did, and he was on the basketball court and obviously on the gridiron. Hey, here's the ball, just take it, run fast, and go to where the colored part of the field is, and we'll score points. He did repeatedly, and on defense, hey, go tackle the ball, and he did, and it was more to it than that. You get what I'm saying, but he just comes in, and I think what Tech did is with him specifically is they were kind of projecting like we don't know what he's really going to be, but we love the measurables, we love to project here a bit, and let's figure this one out because if you see him, he's just really, it's an impressive looking kid, and he's so young. Yeah. So now that we've talked about how hard it is to acclimate and just figure out schemes and the things that you need to know and all that, but he has got it's all in front of him. And I think right now, third string at star, I guess is what I'm hearing.
Sounds like it.
There, that's where Dingle was in the spring, also kind of a bit of a freak. But I just think there's a lot of different things you can do with Marcus Ramon Edwards, including special teams wise, to where you can get that athleticism out there on the field and kind of turn him loose. It's the scheme, and just growing into this deal is going to be the tricky part, and ultimately finding him a home. Like, where do we want to put him and then keep him? Because as you're talking about these star positions, I mean, AJ McCarty's a junior. Brendan Jordan is a sophomore.
Yeah.
If I really want to get Marcus Ramon Edwards on the field, I mean, I don't think you're playing three guys at this spot. Maybe you will. So we'll just kind of see where that goes. But I love and then Justin Horn is absolutely factoring in at outside linebacker, or part of that. He's either the fourth guy or the fifth guy, or whatever it is that they feel like they will play this many linebackers. Coach Bookbinder on record is saying that. And this is the fun part about recruiting. I say this all the time, but you read about these guys, you see them on a list, and then when you start to see it and watch them figure it out, that's what makes it a lot of fun, because these were two fairly highly recruited guys here.
And it must be time for our daily, weekly, hourly offensive line shuffle conversation. And to kick it off, let's just get the latest lay of the land as it relates to what's being tried this week from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire. First, today's episode brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Locked On Texas Tech fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. It's Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Red Raiders? From recruiting players, hiring coaching staff, to overseeing training camp and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Think you can handle the pressure? Find out today. And even better, Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want. And of course, we've got a special offer for Locked On Texas Tech fans. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost for your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk, as it's going to help your team get off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or find it in the app stores, and kick off the ultimate football experience with Ultimate College Football Head Coach now and begin your coaching legacy today. We're talking left guard, we're talking offensive line, then you know it must be time for our daily, weekly, hourly offensive line shuffle conversation. And to kick it off, let's just get the latest lay of the land as it relates to what's being tried this week from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire.
Kind of just still messing with, where everybody is. There were times that Caleb was at left tackle, right guard, right tackle. I definitely feel that Caleb feels, and you can see it on film, better on the right side. Sterling, Sterling missed the first part of camp, so he's playing himself back into shape. He had a pulled hamstring, and so you see him getting in better and better shape. So there was a mixture of like Sterling at left tackle, Vinny at left guard, Sherry at center, DC Carter at right guard, and Caleb at right tackle. You had Ty Buchanan at right tackle whenever Caleb was at left tackle. So we feel really good about our top 6, 7, and then maybe 8 right now, and 9 could get us out of a game. But we feel really good about that there's 6 guys that you can throw Caleb kind of anywhere, and those other guys really fit in well.
Can be dizzying at times, Chris. So what are we making of the latest?
And I realize we've talked about this a lot. Okay, I feel like we're on overload. However, I hope people understand it's not your team, but this is issue number 1 when it comes, other than QB health. This is issue number 1 in trying to figure out where you're at. I think other things have been figured out, or it's not really worried about who's going to start. They're all going to play, all that kind of stuff. I'm not worried about kicker. I'm not worried about your star spot. I'm not worried about depth at corner. I'm not even really worried about inexperience in the secondary or anything. I'm not worried about your skill on offense. At this point, I'm not really worried about Barron's shoulder. And I don't want to say that I'm worried about offensive line, but it's just the one kind of issue that is a bit unresolved, and it doesn't. So a couple things. There's a new scenario introduced here, if you were listening closely, that we had not talked about before, because I've given you option 1 or option 2, but now we have option 3 so just pick a door, A, B, C. I will say this about the offensive line before we get into it. I think everything around that group is so much better than last year, and I don't know what that's worth, but it's worth something. I think your QB being healthy, you've got some more depth at running back. I think the skill around that group up front, and maybe even just the overall depth of the offensive line is just improved. But we've got to figure out this starting group and all that. So the other day we talked about it would either be Sterling Porche or Davion Carter that would be odd man out if you want to go starters. Did you pick up on that maybe that's Ty Buchanan that would be odd man out if we're taking these 6 guys, because I think what we can take it in a Sharpie to this point. Vinny Scurry is your starting left guard. Sheridan Wilson, or Sherry, as Joey calls him, I love that. He's your center. And then I think Caleb Rogers is a starter. I just don't know where.
Right.
and after that, all bets are off. So the group that we introduced, the 2 scenarios we introduced the other day, was Vinny, Sheridan Wilson, and Ty Buchanan at right tackle, and then it's either Davion Carter at right guard and Caleb Rogers at left tackle, or it's Sterling Porche at left tackle and Caleb Rogers at right guard. Okay, now I think we can say what happens if it's Sterling Porche at left tackle, what if it's Davion Carter at right guard, and what if it's Caleb Rogers at right tackle, and then we've left Sheridan Wilson and with Vinny Scurry in there. So that's just probably the conversations that they're having. Which of these scenarios is best? And I don't know if we'll get any clear view on that for a while. I just can't imagine that they land on something and go, this is it. Let's roll, and let's not try any of these other things. But that's kind of what we're talking about. And when do we get there? Is it in Pullman? Is it do they leave the ACU game going, I think we got a good grasp on it? Is it, versus Arizona State or Cincinnati when, toward the end of September? I mean, are you still trying to figure this out when you're in Tucson in early October? I don't know. And sometimes when you have these scenarios, an injury will dictate it. Well, yeah. Somebody gets dinged up. Now we don't have a choice. So this is what we're going to go with. This is the only choice. And sometimes that's, you don't want to say that's the best thing, but it's like, okay, now we don't have to overthink it anymore. We're left without options. So let's do this. And this is what we're going with. And we don't have to wonder and trial and error and all that stuff. But right now you're in the trial and error. It sort of looks like, I mean, as Joey put it, still messing with it.
Yeah,
still messing with it.
We're doing a mess around. I would tell you that regardless of anything that would have happened in fall camp, if you want to be concerned as a Red Raider fan, go on and be concerned. It's justified. That group has stunk for a decade. I mean, aside from some intermittent points of success, including last year, a productive ground game, but otherwise it has not been good. Quarterbacks have been killed. We've had a revolving door. Not every one of those injuries result of the offensive line, I understand, but you get the idea. The group has not been good. So being concerned, I think, is obvious to anyone that's really been paying attention. You bring in 3 newcomers to try and improve it. Is that an encouraging sign or a concerning sign? Well, again, before we've seen anything happen, I'm labeling it concerning that you're having to go for outside help and say, hey, day one, we'd like you to go ahead and be a starter at 3 of the 5 positions that are there along the offensive line. And the last layer to the justifiable concern, if you want to go that route, I think is the fact that the conversation that began the offensive line portion of the dialogue this offseason had to do with Caleb Rogers and where he would be slotted, and he ain't been slotted there yet. And that's been going on since the bowl game. Now, for what reason that is some of the complexity that we've discussed here, and you can continue to roll around in your noggin, not telling you to pull your hair out or to predict the Red Raiders to not go to a bowl game or anything along those lines. But I am telling you, if the offensive line is not improved, then how could we expect necessarily for the team to be significantly improved? And before we see that happen, I get it if people are concerned. So I'm definitely not one of those like, don't worry about it. We're going to get it figured out. I mean, it's 10 years running. They've been trying to figure it out. And we hadn't even mentioned the fact they got a new position coach. So there's another layer. So do whatever you'd like as far as the concern level. But I understand if people are dialed into this portion of the conversation like we are, and you may be concerned to varying degrees, but eventually you got to make the call, right? And God help us if it's October and we're still messing around with some of this stuff. That's not going to be a good indication.
Joey started his fall camp press conference, what feels like, I guess it was about, 3 weeks ago. The question in some form or fashion was, what must this team, big picture, do to, ultimately in the next month or this season to get to where you ultimately want to go? I think it was the first thing he said. The O-line needs to take a step up or make a jump. Yeah. I mean, and so it's not, it's what they know internally. It's what we're talking about. It's not trying to hammer the same issue. And it doesn't mean that they're going to suck. They haven't quite figured out the right pieces on what they think is best yet. Part of you says it's good that they've got some options. They've got some pieces here that they can fiddle with. And it's just like, well, hey man, these 5, it's all we got. We have no choice. But you sure would have felt better if all the pieces fit nicely and you go, yeah, that's how we've been practicing for 2 or 3 weeks. We're straight. Yeah. Right. Like when's game time, but that's not what you've gotten. Cause to quote Joey, it's still messing with it. Yeah. So
a little time left to continue to mess. But eventually we'll be kicking it off for real. Abilene Christian on August 31st. And then it's on and popping following that one, with all due respect to the Wildcats. Chris, appreciate the time and insights as always, man. Enjoyed it, and we'll be back on the other side to wrap up the week.
Guns up, people. Appreciate the subscriptions. Appreciate the comments below, all that goodness, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thanks to those everydayers out there for making us their first listen. And for your second listen, check out Locked On College Football, also right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And yes, one of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So dive in. The water is warm, and they don't bite much. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for hanging with us once again, and hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.